It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this afternoon's authors panel, provocatively entitled "So You Think You Know About Romance?" I think we all think we do. My name is John Jackson. I too am a romantic fiction author, so this afternoon's subject is of special interest to me. Today's discussion is brought to you by Promoting Yorkshire Authors, whose banner you can see behind me. And on the panel today we've got 4 local authors from different areas, not just of Yorkshire, but also of romantic writing generally. On my right, we've got Ava Manello. Ava is a passionate reader, blogger, publisher and author who loves nothing more than helping other indie authors publish their books, be that reviewing, beta reading, formatting or proofreading. She will always be a reader first and foremost. She loves erotic suspense that's well written and engages the reader, and loves promoting the heck out of it for her favourite authors. On her right is Julia Bell, who lives in West Yorkshire. She has 2 children and 5 grandchildren. She qualified as a nurse training at Jimmy's in Leeds. She's been in various other employments, including 6 years working for Her Majesty's Prison Service. And she's the author of several historical romances and 1 modern romance. Next down the line is Carol Warham, and writing has been Carol's love since childhood. She started by making small comics for her dolls. They're still reading. Progressed to training as a journalist for a short while, and once the family had grown up, she settled down to writing short stories, poems and holiday articles, some of which are published. In recent years, she's become a judge in the short story section for the Hysteria UK competition, and also for the RNA's Romance Novel of the Year. And lastly, at the end, an old friend of mine, in the nicest possible way you can imagine, Jane Lovering. Jane lives in North Yorkshire, where she writes romantic comedies and labours under the tragic misapprehension that Johnny Depp is coming calling any day now. Owing to a terrible outbreak of insanity, she's now the minder of 3 cats and an insane terrier. In 2012, her novel Please Don't Stop the Music, for sale afterwards at the back there, won the Romantic Novel of the Year award. And in 2018, last year, her book Christmas at the Little Village School won the Love Story of the Year at the Romantic Novels Association Awards. How about that then? So you think you know about romance? What do you know about romance, Ava?
Considering I've been single for 2 years, very little apparently. What I know about romance is growing up with Disney and Prince Charming and deciding it wasn't real. So you will find that I read a lot of what is sort of bad boy romance. Prince Charming doesn't exist, so I like to read about strong females who can fend for themselves, but at the end of the day I think we all want to believe in happy ever after.
Romance for me, I'm very astute at picking up people's feelings, expressions on their faces. They don't have to say anything to me and I can sort of tell how they feel. Now, romance is character-based, isn't it? So I do like, to me, romance is the people in the story and what they're going through and everything. Everything else is like part of it.
Well, I'm going to slightly disagree with you, Julia. Because it is character-based, I agree that. But we all think about romantic evenings, romantic locations, romantic songs, romantic films. Romance fills every part of our lives in some way or another. But I brought a quote because I love this. And I think it sums up perhaps most of us at a certain age, maybe. Do we need romance in our lives? She had given up her childish notions about romance, sex and love, and come to the inescapable conclusion that everyone who believed in it was either naive, ignorant, or both.
I'm possibly the least romantic person in the world. I've been intermittently single for pretty much my entire life, despite the fact I have 5 children. Let's gloss over that, shall we? And I am resolutely unromantic. My books are romance because they're about people. And it's one thing that everybody knows what it's like to fall in love. They might not fall in love with somebody of the opposite gender, it might be the same gender. Everybody knows what it's like to feel love, even if they've only loved their cat. They know what that all-consuming obsession is. And I write romances, and the best thing people say about my romance is that they feel real.
It's been, for many, many years, the most popular genre of books lent by the libraries and continues to be. every so often though you get this question keeps being asked, is romance dead? What's going to be the next thing with romance? Where is romance going to go? What's going to be the next big thing? I'll put you all on the spot as we started.
I don't know that. I think probably romantic comedy or romantic paranormal comedy seems to be where I'm seeing a lot of growth area. I've got those.
Yeah.
I'll just buy your book for that. Some days I want to read a soft, gentle romance, so maybe a Yorkshire saga. Some days I want to read something a lot grittier, so a paranormal, vampire, a female assassin.
Yes.
And I think that variety is what makes it work and why there's going to be a longevity in it.
I don't think we'll ever go back to the Barbara Carter
God, no.
story. You know, where the heroine is, you know, and I want to be your wife and everything. But I agree that diversity in romantic fiction, I mean, my books are romantic fiction, but they have a tag on. There'll be romantic time travel, romantic paranormal, romantic supernatural. It's not in depth, the romance is still part of it, but it sort of diversifies into different areas.
Whereas books like 50 Shades, the main focus seems to be the sex and less of the story.
Because I've got a friend, you see, that writes lovely books, but they hardly kiss. There's nothing in it. I mean, even the husband and wife just kiss on the cheek, you know. So she calls hers clean romance.
Clean romance. There's a market for clean romance. It's an accepted genre these days.
But certainly, when I've been reading for the Romantic Novel of the Year, I've read lots of different novels that obviously have to have romance.
Yes, sure.
But it's been everything from your paranormal, the historical, even crime, right through now to same-gender romance.
Yeah.
And some of them are very, very well written.
Very well written.
But it's they asked us first whether we were happy reading these, you know, because not everybody perhaps would be. But when you actually get them, it is just a good romantic story. Yeah, romance is branching out. It's opening out into every other genre now. It's not frightened of being seen anywhere, exactly, in any sort of genre, even paranormal, fantasy, vampires.
Going back to your earlier question about one of the growing genres in romance, it definitely is same-sex romance.
Yes.
But what I've noticed is, like you said, there's some really well-written books within there, but it focuses on the story and the characters, and not what happens in the bedroom. So it's actually really good, enjoyable stories too.
Jane, where do you think we're going to be going with it?
If I knew where we were going with it, I'd be writing it, making lots of money.
Wouldn't we all? I know, really.
I think the thing with romance is that because as the world gets more and more fractured and people get further and further from their families and their family units become more spread, people want to read stories that make them happy. And I think romance is a way of reading a book that you know as soon as you pick it up it's going to have a happy ending, because that's one of the givens. It has to have a happy ending. You can't have everybody die at the end. That's not a romance, that's women's fiction. So you know when you pick it up it's going to be a story that gives you that kind of, oh, that was nice. Anything that's coming big in America tends to come over to here. Sweet romance at the moment is growing apparently massively in America. Clean romance. They are having a big backlash against sex.
If you think about it, how popular romance is, because there's thousands of writers that are writing romance. If you think about how big something like the Romantic Novelist Association is, the amount of writers they've got belonging to them, and that's just the ones that belong to it.
Yes.
So romance is big business.
See, I would say that romance doesn't have to have a happy ending.
It does for the RNA. If you remember the RNA.
In terms of...
At least happy for now.
Happy
for now.
The readers I know are very much, they will ask for an ugly cry book. So you've got the romance within the book, but one of the characters will die. I mean, you've got to... Is Nicholas Sparks? Me Before You?
Yes.
Absolute tear. I wouldn't say that's just women's fiction. I would say that is a romance.
I can't remember who wrote it, but one of my favourite films and books was Bridges of Madison County.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember, I was actually listening to the audiobook, it's in the days of cassettes, so it was a while ago. And I was listening on my way to work, and I got to the part where she receives the box showing with all his photography equipment in, he's dead. Well, I couldn't go into work till I stopped sobbing. But that is, to my mind, is one of the most romantic stories I've ever come across. But it doesn't have a particularly happy ending because he dies and she goes back. Just within the four of us, we'll have very different views on what we want to read. I mean, my first love and my main interest, although my book's not historical, but historical novels are what I read. That's my comfort read. That's my go-to. You know, and a little bit of romance in there as well. I don't mind. But I mean, we have very different tastes, and hopefully the books that are written are catering for these different tastes.
Can the cameraman ask a question?
Of course, go on, ask away.
Why do you write romance rather than any other genre?
Because I don't know enough. I'm trying to write a book about a serial killer, and I've always put it off because I wasn't confident I could write about the crime and the procedures and be believable. So I'm writing it from the killer's perspective, very little police involvement, because that was my first genre. For me, I started writing romance kind of by accident because I wrote romantic suspense. It was as close as I could get to writing the suspense I wanted to write. But I had to have a co-author to start with because I was not comfortable writing sex. I wrote the story and the suspense, she came in for the sex. Now, I'm actually, the last book I wrote was a biker romance, and I was halfway through the book and realised there wasn't a sex scene in it. And I realised that wouldn't work in that audience, so I very quickly had to put one in, but I think there is only one. I'm old school. I'm Hobson's choice. They get married, they close the bedroom door, and it's left to the imagination.
I didn't intend to write a romance book. It was a location I came across, and this... have you got a long evening? Because it's a long story.
It's all right.
We were in Florida with the family, and in Disney World, visiting Disney World. And part of, it's not part of Disney World, but created by Disney, is a town called Celebration. But you could look at it and think very Stepford Wives, but it's a lovely, lovely town. And I thought, wow, you know, this town with a name like Celebration, you could really put a good story in there. And I thought, well, I can't call it Celebration, I call it Resolution. And I had this idea of this story. So that was the place, that was the name of the book. I hadn't anything else, I had no characters, I had no story. But then I started thinking about resolutions, and when do we make resolutions? New Year. Why do we make resolutions? Slowly the story evolved, and it was a story about a girl with a past, with a year's past. I'm not going to tell you, you have to read the book. But she comes back to this town called Resolution a year after something has happened, and it's the story is of the resolve of the resolutions, and it becomes a romance, and it developed. As it happens, I won't say it was total rubbish, but everybody that read it said, you can't do this. You've got a town in America called Resolution, that's great, but you've got Yorkshire people in there. I wasn't getting the American feel, the way of speaking and that, so somebody said to me, you've got to bring it back to Yorkshire. You've got to. Sorry, I live in West Yorkshire. There's no way there's going to be a town called Resolution in there. But I got round it. The book's still called Resolutions, and I got round it. But that developed into a romance without me trying. It just happened.
I wrote my romance because I like taking people apart. Seeing what makes them work. I mean, not in a serial killer way, obviously, just in a psychological way. And I like to get inside people's heads. I like to give them a really difficult situation and see how they think about it. So my books deal with, I've got disability, I've got mental illness, I've got adoption, I've got all sorts of scenarios, and my characters are placed in a position where everything changes. Everything must change for some reason or another. And I just put them in there and I sort of go, right, now work out what you do. And quite often it's based around a central character who has to come to terms with something usually quite bad. And through that, they talk to other people, they find themselves in a situation where they are forming an attachment with another person. My heroes and heroines are usually friends, or they become friends. They don't just see somebody and go, pants feelings! They actually know each other, they form an attachment, they grow to like each other, and some kind of resolution comes from that. And it's because of the psychology of the way that people work that they need to have somebody else in their life to help them deal with things. And usually both parties have a problem, have something that they want, that they need to come to terms with. And it's not love cures all.
Well, I write what I like reading. The girls at work, all of them read crime, all of them. Not romance, crime. Oh, you should read this and you should read that. But I know I'd never be able to follow the clues. Now, I write historical romances because I love history. I love going round palaces and castles and walking up the steps where people walked 100 years ago. My husband, when I was married, he used to stay outside. He hated it. He used to sit outside and I'd have to go around Windsor Castle or all the places. And I loved that. And to be honest, I started writing seriously as I'm writing now when I went through my divorce. And if anybody's been through a divorce, it is dreadfully painful. And I sort of started to write romance because of the feelings I had, the anguish and the despair and not knowing what I'm doing. So I put all that in my characters. I'm also a terrible eavesdropper, so be careful what you say because I might take it down and put it in one of my books. And because I haven't got a car, I do travel a lot on trains and buses, and I sit there.
Oh, you can do wonderful things in the
All
buses.
ladies behind me, and I'm just listening away. They're about like, well, no, they myself, but I mean, 70 or 80-year-olds. They've got such a lot of history, and they're talking about when they were young and what happened to them. And although it is fiction,
They talk quite loudly as well
and they
because
do
they're
it
not hearing
too. Oh,
consequences.
yes, I like this, And
But what's your next going to be?
My next one.
Next one. Your chance to pimp your next one.
I've hit a bit of a writing block.
Me too.
I think I'm putting the serial killer aside slightly because I'm not in quite as bad a mood and not quite feeling to break people in with a crowbar. Mine is probably going to be the follow-up to my last book, so it's going to be the second in the biker series.
Yeah.
But I'm going to take it back. The last story started when a baby's abandoned at the gates of an MC and jumps forward 30 years to when a mother reappears. I think this next book is going to be taking the main male character who brought her up. We're going to go back 30 years to when it happened, and it's going to be the story how, at the minute, I think, he puts his life on hold to bring up this little abandoned baby.
writer's block, but I made a decision after 10 ebooks to have a bit of a rest. So I'm helping my son get my books into paperback, and I'm doing a lot of marketing. And I'm also trying to write short stories. And
well, I've actually 2 books on the go. One I started, but I fell out of love with.
Oh, we've all done that.
Yeah. It's still there. I want to write it. It's based in North Yorkshire, and it actually has a ghost in it, so it's a bit different. But I couldn't quite get to grips with my characters. They would not behave. Anyway, I am now concentrating on a book, and everybody says to me, "Why are you writing this?" Because I fell in love with it. It actually takes place on Fair Isle. That is that little island between Shetland and Orkney.
Where the jumpers come from.
Yes, it's very difficult to get to. Once you're on it, it's very difficult to get off it.
I've just reached that stage. There's always a stage.
Yeah.
40,000 words in, and it's the worst book in the world. I've got to finish it because I've got a deadline of April. My publisher's bought me on a 2-book deal. So I've got to write it. They're
Brexit, isn't it? You can't damage the Brexit.
Yes, it's just horrifying. Horrifying. They bought me as a 2-book deal, 2 books set in Dorset. It's called Seasons by the Sea is the overarching title. So the first one was set at Christmas. This is a book set in the middle of summer in Dorset. My heroine is non-neurotypical. She may have Asperger's, it may have been brought on by her upbringing, we're not sure. She's gone to Dorset to do some seaweed research because she's a PhD. She's dealing with seaweed for nutrition. She's doing a big research about whether the seaweed is edible, whether we can farm seaweed off the coast of Britain. She's doing all that with her research assistant, and she's gone to this house which is owned by the university to do this. She's met an Australian man who's just rocked up into Dorset doing some research into his family because his great-grandfather came from the village in Dorset and disappeared, and his great-grandmother went out to Australia to bring up her children because she had to do something because her great-grandfather disappeared. He's come over looking for his great-grandfather. They have met because he's living in her shed for convoluted reasons. Yeah. And he really quite fancies her, but she is not open to any kind of romantic overtures whatsoever. And there's a seagull called Roger, who was hand-reared and follows her around a lot. And Brendan, who's the Australian, is terrified of this seagull. In Australia, their seagulls are quite little. Our seagulls are massive. This is a proper big seagull that keeps...
Any questions for our panel?
I think the question, I missed 20 minutes, so I apologize if you've already answered it, but I'm just wondering if your plots, so when you come to write your books, it will vary between 4 of you, but whether you have a sort of association, a romance in mind, and then you build a plot around it, or you have a plot generate, and then weave the romance in.
I've got the you're gonna die,
And
you're gonna get
early on.
somebody needs to get together, and then I think that kind of comes as I write, because I don't know about anybody else. I've had books where I've had a kind of plot, got halfway through the book, and it got to what would have been the end, and thought, well, that hasn't gone how it was meant to be.
No.
You're talking about your story, you've got your story. Do you find that characters appear that you haven't actually envisaged appearing?
I just get people. People just walk through my head. And they'll just start doing something.
Don't you hate it when they do that?
It's very annoying because they'll be doing something really random and I'm thinking, what on earth are you doing? And I'll start a story and I know I'm going to write romance because that's what I write. So I know it's going to be a romance. So I'll start with maybe a heroine, a character. I haven't got a clue who she's going to fall in love with, but she will do something which will make it absolutely imperative that something else happens. And then that will happen, and then that sets up an imperative for something else to happen. That's kind of how plots work. It's kind of, there must always lead linearly on from one another. So if you start off with a person doing something, yes, they can branch off in lots of different ways, but you pick away at branches and you just follow that right through. And that just leads to people doing the things that people do. And normally my main couple will end up together, but side people will suddenly appear. And they will say the most random. I've got one of the things, and I usually quote it in one of my vampire books, and I was just writing something, and she's sitting in the car with this vampire, and he says something, and I'm just like, what on earth do you say that for? That's just... So I just thought, I'll just go with it, I'll just run with it. And I just carried on. I thought, I can always go back and change it, and I ran with it, and then I got to a point, and it became obvious why he'd said that. And I just thought, you clever bastard. And I don't know whether that was me or him. Because I hadn't worked it out, but my subconscious had worked it out, and it knew exactly what was going to happen. So, yeah.
Do you?